Take a moment and ask yourself a simple but uncomfortable question. Why do some people change their lives permanently while others try again and again and stay exactly the same? It's not because they don't want it badly enough. It's not because they lack intelligence, resources, or opportunity. The real reason is far deeper and far more powerful. Every result you're getting right now is perfectly aligned with who you believe you are. Most people spend their lives trying to change their outcomes without ever questioning the force that creates those outcomes in the first place. They focus on goals, tactics, habits, and motivation, yet overlook the invisible hand guiding every decision they make. That invisible force is identity. It is the quiet belief system you carry about who you are, what you deserve, and what is possible for you. Long before you take action, your identity has already decided how far you will go, how much you will tolerate, and when you will stop. Your identity shapes your behavior automatically. You don't wake up each morning debating whether to act like yourself. You simply do. If you believe you are disciplined, you act with discipline even when no one is watching. If you believe you are unlucky, you unconsciously search for proof that life works against you. If you believe you are capable, resilient, and resourceful, you look for solutions even under pressure. These beliefs are not loud or dramatic. They operate in the background, silently directing your focus, emotions, and choices. Every habit you have today is an expression of who you believe you are. You don't just eat certain foods, manage money a certain way, or respond to stress randomly. You act in ways that feel consistent with your self-image. This is why change feels so hard for so many people. They try to install new behaviors on top of an old identity. They say they want success, confidence, or freedom, but deep down they still see themselves as someone who struggles, doubts, or plays small. The result is internal conflict, exhaustion, and eventually a return to old patterns. What makes identity so powerful is that it sets your standards, and your standards determine your life. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of what you accept as normal for yourself. When something violates your identity, you resist it. When something aligns with it, you repeat it. That's why two people can face the same challenge and respond completely differently. One sees it as a signal to quit. The other sees it as a call to rise, not because of circumstances, but because of identity. The good news is that identity is not fixed. It is built through repetition, emotion, and meaning. At some point in your life, you decided who you were, often unconsciously, based on past experiences, feedback from others, and moments of pain or success. Those decisions hardened into beliefs, and those beliefs became habits. But just as identity was formed, it can be reformed. The moment you become aware that identity is running your life, you reclaim your power. When you shift who you believe you are, everything downstream changes. Your focus sharpens. Your decisions become clearer. Your actions feel more natural. You stop forcing yourself to change and start allowing change to happen through alignment. Identity is not just part of the equation. It is the equation, and once you understand that, you realize you've never been stuck. You've simply been loyal to an old definition of yourself. Most people believe that transformation happens when they finally do more, try harder, or push themselves beyond their limits. They think change is about effort, discipline, and willpower. For a short period of time, that approach can work. You can force yourself to wake up earlier, eat better, work longer, and stay focused through sheer determination. But eventually something breaks. Motivation fades, old habits return, and people assume they failed, when in reality they were fighting against who they believed they were. Lasting change doesn't come from doing more. It comes from becoming someone different. Behavior is a reflection, not a cause. Actions are the surface, identity is the source. When you try to build a new life with the same internal self-image, you are constantly swimming upstream. Every new habit feels heavy. Every challenge feels like proof that change is not meant for you. This is why so many people start strong and finish the same. They try to change their life without changing their identity. Think about how effortlessly you act in ways that align with who you believe you are. You don't need reminders to behave like yourself. You don't need motivation to protect your self-image. You naturally move in ways that feel familiar and safe. That is why someone who sees themselves as confident speaks up without overthinking, while someone who sees themselves as shy needs enormous effort to do the same. The difference is not capability, it is identity. When you shift identity, effort transforms into alignment. The actions that once required force begin to feel natural. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop relying on motivation. Instead of asking, how do I make myself do this? You begin to think, this is just who I am now. That shift changes everything. It rewires how you respond to stress, how you recover from failure, and how you interpret setbacks. Becoming someone different does not mean pretending or hoping. It means making a decision about who you are and reinforcing it through consistent action. Identity is shaped by what you repeatedly do, especially when it's uncomfortable. Each time you act in alignment with a new self-image, you cast a vote for that identity. Over time, those votes compound, and the new identity becomes real, stable, and automatic. This is why real transformation often feels less dramatic than people expect. It's not a sudden burst of motivation. It's a quiet internal shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. You stop identifying as someone who struggles and start identifying as someone who learns and adapts. Once that shift takes place, your behavior no longer needs to be forced because it's no longer foreign. The most powerful changes in life happen when identity leads and behavior follows. When you become the type of person who naturally lives the standards you once chased, progress accelerates. You don't rely on discipline to stay on track because your actions are now an expression of who you are. At that point, change is no longer something you struggle to maintain. It becomes something you sustain effortlessly because you are no longer trying to change your life. You are simply living in alignment with the person you've decided to become. Your identity was not handed to you at birth as a fixed label. It was constructed over time, shaped by experiences, reinforced by repetition, and strengthened by emotion. Every time something significant happened and you attached meaning to it, a belief was formed. A success became proof of who you were. A failure became a warning about what to expect. Over time, these moments stacked on top of each other until a clear story emerged about who you are and how life works. What's important to understand is that this process was not destiny. It was conditioning. You didn't consciously sit down and design your identity. It was built through patterns. If you struggled repeatedly, you may have started to see yourself as someone who struggles. If you were criticized enough, you may have labeled yourself as not enough. If you succeeded in certain areas, you may have decided that confidence only belongs there. None of these beliefs were facts. They were conclusions drawn from repetition. The human mind is wired to look for consistency. Once you believe something about yourself, you unconsciously search for evidence to support it. You remember the moments that confirm the story and ignore the ones that challenge it. This is why identity feels so solid, even when it's limiting. It's not because it's true, it's because it's familiar. And familiarity feels safe, even when it keeps you stuck. Because identity was built through repetition, it can be rebuilt the same way. The past does not get to vote unless you let it. The experiences that shaped you do not define you unless you keep reinforcing their meaning. The moment you realize that your current identity is a pattern, not a prison, everything begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as trained. Rebuilding identity does not require denying your past. It requires redefining what it means. A setback no longer means you are incapable. It means you are learning. A fear no longer means you are weak. It means you are stretching. A failure no longer becomes a label. It becomes feedback. When you consciously change the meaning you assign to experiences, you weaken the old identity and make space for a new one. Each small decision you make is a signal to your nervous system about who you are. When you do what you said you would do, even in a small way, you reinforce a new self-image. When you hold a higher standard for yourself, you send a message that this is your new normal. Over time, these signals accumulate, and the identity you once thought was permanent begins to loosen its grip. The most empowering realization is that you are not late, broken, or behind. You are simply living out an identity that was shaped by repetition. And just as repetition created it, repetition can transform it. The moment you take conscious control of who you are becoming, you step out of autopilot and into authorship. You stop reliving the past and start rehearsing the future. Identity is not something you find. It is something you build, one decision at a time. The instant you change what you believe about who you are, your behavior begins to reorganize itself. Not because you forced it to, but because behavior naturally follows belief. Your mind is constantly seeking alignment between your actions and your self-image. When there's harmony, life feels fluid. When there's conflict, it feels exhausting. This is why belief is not just a thought. It is a command that shapes how you move through the world. Most people attempt to change their behavior first and hope their beliefs will catch up later. They say they want to be confident, disciplined, or focused, yet deep down they still identify as someone who hesitates, procrastinates, or doubts. That internal mismatch creates resistance. The body hesitates. The mind negotiates. The old patterns pull you back because they feel familiar and safe. Belief acts like a filter. It determines what you notice, what you ignore, and what you interpret as possible or impossible. When you believe you are capable, you see opportunities where, see obstacles. When you believe you are unworthy, you minimize your wins and magnify your mistakes. The world does not change in these moments. Your perception does. And perception drives behavior far more powerfully than circumstances ever could. When belief shifts, decision-making becomes simpler. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start asking, "What's the next move?" Confidence stops being something you try to feel and becomes something you express through action. Discipline stops being a battle and becomes a standard. You no longer rely on willpower because your behavior is now supported by identity rather than fighting against it. This shift often happens in a moment of clarity or decision. A line is drawn. You decide that the old story no longer fits. And once that decision is made with enough emotional intensity, your nervous system treats it as truth. From that point forward, behaviors that once felt optional begin to feel necessary. You don't tolerate what violates your new identity. You don't negotiate with habits that contradict who you believe you are. The most powerful part of this process is how quickly behavior follows belief when the belief is real. You don't need years of evidence before acting differently. The evidence comes after. Action becomes a way of confirming the belief rather than creating it. Each aligned action strengthens the new identity, and the identity strengthens the behavior in return. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop. This is why some people seem to change overnight. Not because they learned a new technique, but because they adopted a new belief about themselves. Once that belief took hold, their posture changed, their voice changed, their choices changed. They didn't need to be reminded, they didn't need to be pushed. Their behavior naturally rose to meet the new standard. When you understand this, you stop trying to fix behavior and start upgrading belief. You stop asking how to force yourself to change and start asking who you must become. And when that belief shifts at the core level, behavior no longer requires constant effort. It becomes an expression of alignment. You move differently because you see yourself differently, and that internal shift quietly but powerfully reshapes everything. Why do? When identity shifts, struggle begins to dissolve, not because life gets easier, but because your actions finally align with who you believe you are. Effort feels heavy when you are pushing against an old self-image. It feels like dragging yourself forward, forcing discipline, negotiating with resistance. But when identity changes, that same effort transforms into momentum. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're moving with yourself. This is the difference between chasing results and embodying standards. Results require constant pressure. Standards create consistency. When your identity is clear, you don't need motivation to act in alignment with it. You don't wake up debating whether to do what matters. You simply do because anything else would feel out of character. This is where power is born, not from intensity, but from alignment. Momentum builds when your actions stop feeling like exceptions and start feeling like expressions. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined," you begin to live as someone who keeps their word. Instead of saying, "I hope I stay consistent," you operate as someone who does not negotiate their standards. This shift removes friction. Decisions become faster. Recovery from setbacks becomes quicker. Progress compounds instead of resets. When identity is strong, struggle no longer defines you. Challenges still show up, but they don't shake your core. You don't interpret difficulty as a signal to stop. You interpret it as part of the process. The emotional weight of effort decreases because effort now has meaning. You're not pushing to become someone else. You're reinforcing who you already are becoming. This is why aligned action feels energizing rather than draining. You can work longer, stay focused, and push through discomfort without burnout. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because your identity is pulling you forward. The nervous system relaxes when there is congruence. Resistance fades when behavior and belief move in the same direction. Momentum is not created by doing more things. It's created by removing internal conflict. When identity and action agree, you stop wasting energy on self-doubt, hesitation, and second-guessing. That reclaimed energy becomes clarity. It becomes speed. It becomes confidence in motion. You begin to trust yourself because your actions consistently confirm your self-image. Over time, this momentum creates a new normal. What once felt like growth now feels like maintenance. What once felt difficult now feels expected. You don't celebrate every small win because living at this level is no longer extraordinary. It's who you are. Standards quietly rise, not because you demand more from yourself, but because anything less no longer fits. This is the ultimate power of identity shift. You stop chasing outcomes and start living from alignment. Struggle turns into structure. Effort turns into flow. Momentum carries you forward even on days when emotions fluctuate. And from the outside, it looks like discipline, confidence, and consistency. But on the inside, it feels simple, natural, and inevitable because you are no longer trying to change your life. You are expressing the standards of the person you have decided to be.